everybody, and welcome to the Woo Krampus themed episode of the Pop Occulture Show with me, Lilith Dorsey, and my co-host,
Jason Winslade. This is episode 6 of our new season, and we are all up in the holidays right now. Christmas has exploded all over my apartment. Don't have the tree up yet, working on that this weekend, but we are anticipating a festive Krampusnacht coming up, and we'll talk about what that means for those of you who are unfamiliar. So yeah, and I want to make sure that I don't get carried to hell by Krampus by being in the spirit with my somewhat Christmassy themed jacket and shirt.
You're naughty in the sack with you. That's what I say.
Naughty in the sack, what?
That's the thing. You go into Krampus's sack, right? Like he hits you with a stick
Sure.
and you get in Krampus's sack. So in the sack with you.
There's a lot of levels there. But yeah, or in a handbasket. There's a whole thing about the putting the children in the basket, and it made me think: is that the origin of the term "going to hell in a handbasket"?
Probably, I think so. I mean, I think there's so much, and we'll unpack a lot of this on the show, hopefully. But there's so much about Krampus that's just sort of the stereotypical demon, right? And everything that gets attached to the Krampus legend or lore, especially in its brand new incarnation, right? Like, so I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up hearing about Krampus.
No, not at all. Well, here, actually, I've got a couple of things here. You got this guy.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. He's dancing.
That's fantastic.
This is the Krampus Jack-in-a-Box.
That's nice.
There's even like this is one of those Krampus carton things that we'll talk about, the weird postcards in the late 19th century that featured Krampus. And I believe in the movie there was a whole Jack-in-the-Box sequence as well. So there's something about the Jack-in-the-Box in Krampus. There's some versions of those Krampus postcards that have the woman Krampus who's not ugly. She's just a woman with maybe some horns and that's it. And she's got wayward men in her basket.
I've seen that. We have an artist here in New Orleans that does a whole series called Krampus, like ESS, right? So
right.
It's again highly sexualized. I wonder if anybody's ever done a Krampus burlesque. That would be intense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. that is. I'm pretty darn sure that has happened, and I'm pretty sure I know people who have done it in Chicago, especially with the horns and everything. So yeah, we didn't grow up hearing about this. This wasn't a thing in America. In our time, but it's very much a European thing, specifically Bavarian and Austrian. And so, I don't know how much you know about the history. You want to talk about that, or I can talk about that, or
you can talk about it. I do just want to throw in here that, if you look at Krampus when you're doing any kinds of perfunctory research or something like that, the first thing you get is that Krampus is supposed to be the son of the goddess Hel or Hala, which people might be familiar with. Here's yes, I'm actually related to Hel. How's this work? My great-grandmother's maiden name was Holborn, so that's Helborn, right? Like, so basically, and they were Northern Scots. So basically, you've got this kind of, very next to Scandinavia kind of mythology going on about Hel and all of that. So it's kind of like I'm cousins of Krampus. That's what I say anyway.
So here's the thing. A lot of people talk about how it's pre-Christian, and that he's supposedly the son of Hel, and all this kind of folkloric stuff, but yet apparently there's absolutely no evidence in the folklore of that's just something that people started to talk about. Now, obviously, it's folklore, so it's not about finding the actual evidence of the actual thing. But when you look at pre-Christian folklore of that region, you don't see it. So there's not actually any proof of that, but it's a good story. Also, there's there's a lot of talk about how it was a thing in like the 6th or 7th century, and associated with Saint Nicholas. But again, most of that's oral tradition. It wasn't really written down until like the 11th century. But yeah, there's the whole thing about the connection between Saint Nicholas, right? Now, I don't know if you ever did this when you were a kid, like on Saint Nicholas Day, which I believe is the 6th of December.
Yes.
Again, very, very European, but it did actually filter down into my bizarre, Northeast Ohio Catholic experience. And we were taught about St. Nicholas Day that, you put your shoes out, and, you're supposed to get, if you're good, you get candy or something in your shoes. And I remember doing this as a kid, in the days leading up to December 6th, putting my shoes outside my bedroom door every day and every night. And my parents were just, they didn't know what the heck was going on. And I'm not sure how they figured it out. Whether I said something, or maybe they're like, maybe they talked to the nuns and like, why is my kid putting his shoes out every night? And so I did eventually get some candy in the shoes. But so they don't
Maybe St.
mention
Nicholas came. You're a cynic.
Right.
Maybe St. Nicholas really came and left you candy.
Well, yeah, with my 0% Germanic, well, maybe I got 0.001. I mean, the British stuff. There's all kinds of Germanic stuff in the British thing, but yeah, we were never told about Krampus. We were certainly told about the devil and all that, but there wasn't any relation to that then. But yeah, so so in the stories, Krampus comes the day before, so the bad kids are taken care of first. So it's almost like this, he takes them away. It's not clear whether he eats them or drowns them or carries them to hell. Pick your poison. But I guess it's like this Bavarian rapture where the bad kids are taken away and the good kids are left, and the good kids get the candy on St. Nicholas Day. Whatever.
No, I used to put my shoes out. I remember that. And I feel really bad for my parents and my grandparents, because again, any kind of anything that was spiritual that I could ascribe to, where I was going to get something, I did it. So,
Right.
And half the time, you're right, they didn't notice, but eventually some of them, it's like, why are these damn shoes here? And then I would tell them, that's because St. Nicholas is coming. When my kids were little, they used to pray to St. Nicholas, and I would be able to, for things like, I want it to be sunny on the field trip tomorrow, and I would be like, well, I don't know. And then it would always work. So, they got one over on me, and so did St. Nicholas. But so much of this, it reminds me of the conversations we've had when we were doing workshops on water magic and other things about, demons and things that are dark and scary and really sort of cautionary tales for children. And I've raised a lot of kids, and I definitely see this value in having this, oh, well, you better be good, or maybe Krampus will come, I mean, like that. But I also want kids to put their toys away and things like that, I think it's interesting that. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, there was this whole genre of these polar opposites of Saint Nick or Santa Claus in various cultures, that there's always some kind of demon or bad fairy who's beating the kids, or in some cases, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, but in some cases there's very racist depiction as well.
Oh, sure.
Of I don't want to say, is it Black Peter or something like that, where there's always this negative figure that goes along with that just kind of got filtered out as it made its way into American corporate culture, because they didn't want to, bad kids buy presents too, so they didn't want to encourage that kind of division. They want everybody to take place in the capitalism, so the consuming.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. I love it.
But yeah, that somehow that has the way that things have evolved in culture, that has kind of come out of it. But then the big question has been like, what brought it back? And there's always this connection since the 19th century with Germanic culture. But I've read some things where in 2004 there was this artist who came up with a bunch of these woodcuts that then somehow spread into the popular imagination, And then more and more things were happening where there are the different events and things like that, and suddenly it became a thing. And now there's like haunted houses with Krampuses and all the bad movies and things like that. But you can't really pinpoint what the turning point was, what the tipping point for that being a pop culture thing. And now it's everywhere.
I mean, I think it's twofold. You mentioned it. You mentioned this sort of desire. I think, number one, the desire to commercialize Christmas again and to sort of stretch out this period in between Halloween and Christmas, right? Like, so now we've got a whole Krampus thing in there that's scary, like Halloween.
Christmas forgot kids.
Whatever also has to do with Christmas. So we've got this kind of thing there. I think also because, here in New Orleans, we have a Krampus parade. We'll have a parade for anything. So I think that it's true. So I think that this kind of appeal it was yet another, excuse to celebrate. All the parades, it's full of like a lot of drinking and lasciviousness and this whole kind of dark side of things, which I think is very, I don't know, romantic, nostalgic, all those words I want to throw at it, and I think that's part of the appeal. And you mentioned the haunted house. I just saw today we have, one of our Halloween haunted houses had turned itself over for Krampus for next weekend, whereas if you're watching this weekend. So there's this way in which, we can keep making a dollar off of these things. And that's very attractive to people.
Yeah, I mean, in Chicago, it's pretty low key in terms of Krampus events. Like there's a couple of there's not really a parade. There's kind of like a procession at this one place, and there's a bunch of Krampus themed nights at bars, and or they'll have, connecting to our last week's show, there'll be Krampus markets, Krampus Mart type of things where again those more sort of occulty gothic vendors will get together and do stuff that's more holiday themed. But apparently it's very big in places like in Milwaukee, of all places. There's a big,
they have a large, European population that sort of embraces those kinds. I was thinking, we didn't really have Oktoberfest, when we were kids either, only places here or there. And now it's a big thing all over the US, so it's just another excuse to party. That to me, that's how I see it. I want to know, but you said you'd mention it. I want to know how the postcards got started. Like, what was that?
Yeah, I mean that was a thing where if you look at, there is this really interesting crossover, I think, in terms of Occulture with just postcards and greeting cards in general. And if you look at some of the early, when Christmas was starting to become commercialized, you look at some of these early Christmas cards and they're weird as heck.
Yeah.
like there's a Christmas card with a frog that stabbed another frog or something like that, like just bizarre stuff. So yeah, in the late 19th century, there was this whole again genre of postcards called Krampuskarten, and it showed like the candle that I showed you that had Krampus beating kids and good fun holiday stuff, but then it evolved into sort of that more kind of adult, almost burlesque type feel to it of provocative women who are going after men who have cheated, or almost kind of proto-feminist stuff as well. So it kind of
love to
both ways.
This. I would love to see if anybody's done any studies, not just of what the actual images were, but like, what did it say on it? Like, if it was 1932, could I send my, naughty ex-boyfriend a naughty Krampus card?
Well, some of it was, it went both ways, because some of it was Krampus was a lascivious man, himself. And again, you look at the way that we connected with mythology, and it's a very Pan figure and Green Man and all that kind of thing. But that there are some versions which Krampus is chasing the women. But I especially like the role reversal one where it's the Krampus who's going after the dudes, and got the man in a suit by his ankle. I
don't know. I don't care what gender I am. I'm just telling him I'm coming for him. That's what I'm saying.
There you go.
There we go.
So yeah, a big impact that of Krampus on pop culture was that 2015 movie that had a bunch of pretty well-known people in it. Tony
Toni
Collette,
Collette. Yeah.
The guy from Parks and Rec, I forget his name.
Yeah.
Bunch of people, and I love that movie. I mean, I'm not, again, we've had this discussion before. I'm not really a huge horror fan, but like it's billed as a horror comedy. But when I was watching, I was kind of like, this is kind of like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation if there was a demon involved, you know?
Yeah, it definitely has those comedic moments. I think it's definitely accessible enough for everybody, but then it has that scary element, and again, I think it's the perfect bridge between the scary Halloween movie and the wholesome Christmas movie.
Well, you even have your, David Koechner is the Randy Quaid character, you're right. Like you even have the cousin with the obnoxious family and the dog, and all that kind of stuff. So the premise of the film is that if you are, I don't know, if you lose your Christmas spirit, and it's like poor kid is like, I hate Christmas because his family is really shitty to him.
Yeah, dysfunctional. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he tears up his letter to Santa and throws in the fire, and somehow Krampus gets a hold of this and punishes him and the family, and it's kind of like, well, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one who has very unpleasant family Christmas memories mixed in with the good ones. So it's kind of all of us, so we can relate to it. But the whole thing, that movie struck me as very, very Night Gallery, very Twilight Zone, because it has to do with that twist and the moral lesson involved in that twist. So, spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen the film from 8 years ago, that even though it seems like everybody is killed, they are somehow alive in this beautiful Christmas setting, but then it turns out it's a snow globe, and it's one of many snow globes in Krampus's house kingdom, which also kind of makes me think of a Baba Yaga thing as well.
Yeah.
That these people are, and they're stuck in snow globes. And I have this, I think if you see it, I have this like row of snow globes on my shelf there. It's like,
oh, nice.
Like what is the snow globe, and what is that? That's sort of like it is the microcosm, right? If you want to do an occult approach to that, what is the microcosm of Christmas and winter, and you got your snow or the glitter or whatever. But the idea that they're trapped in the snow globe, this moment in time that's frozen, and that you basically you're going to be celebrating Christmas for eternity. There is no there is no non-Christmas anymore. It's all Christmas all the time till the end of time. So
that's your punishment.
Yeah. So there's definitely something very, very, I think, occult in that as well.
It reminds me of all those witches with jars in the freezer. Okay, I'm going to freeze you in time, right? Like I'm going to take Witch 101 on TikTok. That's kind of something that we do, right? I don't do it, but I know a lot of other people do it and things like that. But yeah, I think that's most people's exposure. I did watch a couple of other Krampus movies. It was painful. I apologize to my brain and my sanity. I watched Krampus Origins and Krampus the Return, which is the new one that came out last year. There was very little, if anything, of value in either. Really low budget, really low production. I do love that they sort of stereotypically piece together bits and pieces from here, including things like sacrifice and, again, what happens if you're not keeping Christmas holy, right? That's a big trope about Krampus. I did like, there's one bit in the Krampus the Return about the Black Forest, which to me is one of the scariest parts of the entire whole Krampus lore, because anyone who's been to the Black Forest, it's a creepy place. Like it's just very intense, right? We have, who knows whether or not it really happened, but we have stories of Crowley trying to hex the Nazis in the Black Forest.
Right.
We have like all these sort of creepy, dark, occult things happening in the forest. We've got the Brothers Grimm telling stories about what happens if you go into the forest. That was the forest people were going into, so there's definitely something weird there. I mean, I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but as someone who's been there, there's definitely something in those forests.
Yeah, speaking of the Brothers Grimm, there a few years ago that show Grimm had a Krampus episode, and in that mythology, it's a person who transforms into Krampus every year because of a curse or something like that. So it's almost like a were Krampus or something. I don't know.
I was going to say a weird Krampus.
Okay. Right. But it is really interesting the way that I mean, just in general, the roles that demons play in our folklore and mythology, that the way that we think of them as evil, but yet they're sort of baked into the morality of the universe and the supreme being. That there has to be this dark side that punishes, just like why there has to be a Satan, an adversary, in the biblical stories. But in the Old Testament and everything, he's doing what God told him to do, right? Like he's punishing Job and doing all those things that we associate with evil, but yet he's still doing the Lord's work, as it were. So it's very interesting when you look at these things in terms of the Christianization of it all, as opposed to say a more sort of because I think like fairy stories are much scarier, I think, than devil stories, because for this reason, the fairy don't give up, like they will mess with you. Even the supposedly good ones will mess with you just because they can, not because they have some God telling them what to do. So like there's a lot more chaos involved, and so I think that there's Krampus kind of crosses that line a bit and sort of literally has a foot in both worlds, I think. That pagan and
I think that's the hell mythology, right? Like, because she's usually seen as the half walking in death and half walking in life, so you've got this duality, you've got this balance. And again, instead of it being something that was demonized or one was dark and one was light, they were just both necessary. And I think Krampus reminds us of that, and that's why there's been more embracing of it, right? It's not the repressed 70s and 80s we grew up in with Reagan and Florence Henderson and all of that, as bad as it is now.
I mean, it is that class. It's the return of the repressed, right? It is that classic Freudian thing where we're now, especially post 9/11, we're definitely in this moment in our culture where we are not only acknowledging these other parts in the dark side or whatever, but embracing it and making it. I mean, we're not turning these characters into heroes, but we are identifying with it. It's kind of what we talked about with Coffin Joe, right? That these supposed villains are what represent our values. Even like that kind of, it's a new romanticism in a way, because it's very similar to how the Luciferian figures in the Romantic era were celebrated as being rebellious and taking the Milton Lucifer character in Paradise Lost and making him a hero, because he stood against the tyrannical rule, right? It is this very interesting moment in culture, the way that demons, villains, and things like that stand for us, right? Or stand for people who are marginalized or what have you.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's something that, everybody's talking about embracing their shadow side, and Krampus in a lot of ways really is the shadow side of our childhood, right? Because we talk about St. Nicholas and having this faith and hope and love and all those great things, right? Generosity.
And how many of us grew up, maybe not with birch trees, but grew up having our parents swatting us. So like, there has to be some acknowledgement that that's part of our childhood, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
So I don't know. Do we have anything else to say about Krampus?
Krampus, generational trauma, whatever, well,
It comes from the German word for claw. I
right,
wanted
for
to say that.
claw.
And we also want to thank Coop Teflon for joining our Patreon. Please join our Patreon. We need our lovely viewers to support us any way they can. Everything helps.
Patreon.com, Pop Culture Show. Right there.
I guess he's putting a link there,
Yes.
not just pointing to down below. It's not the Krampus episode.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that Coop Teflon talked about last week was the Perchta, I have to show you character,
yeah.
and there's a lot of association there too with Krampus. That figure, along with Krampus, has become again popular in terms of pop culture. The winter hag that disembowels you if you don't clean your apartment or something, all that fun stuff. So yeah, there's this resurgence of these scary figures associated with Christmas, and I don't know, maybe it's because Christmas has become more scary for people who maybe can't afford all the huge presents under the tree anymore. So yeah, there's definitely a movement there.
Tell us about our next episode.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, thank you. That's the segue we were getting to. Was that our next episode? We're going to be talking with a storyteller by the name of Amelia Cotter, and she's going to be talking about the ghost stories of Christmas and winter solstice. It'll be airing on winter solstice, and it's not just Scrooge. Although that is a major, there's a lot of ways we can talk about Scrooge and Christmas Carol as an occult story. That I've always thought of it as a sort of initiation parable, but we'll talk about that next time. But yeah, we'll have Amelia Cotter talking about ghost stories on winter solstice, so that should be great. So be sure to join us next time, and of course, thank you for subscribing, thank you for watching us and letting us into your homes this holiday, along with your fake fires and your TV and all that's fun stuff. And happy Krampusnacht.
Blessed Krampusnacht. Get your demon on.
Get your demon on. Get on your demons, or one of those.
Get out your demons? I don't know. Whatever. I'm fine.
Right. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
2 weeks. Thanks for joining us.
Next time.